Well, folks, a little bit of a different venue today. As you can probably guess, that is the U.S. Supreme Court building behind me. I'm in Washington, D.C. Was here yesterday also for meetings with congressional leaders, more meetings today, and lots of exciting stuff always happening in Washington, D.C. You're hearing the sights and sounds of the city behind me, just waking up, and hope you enjoy that. Just wanted to mention big news that came out yesterday and is continuing today, and it's as I predicted over 2 weeks ago. A lot of concern about an AI bubble in which we're apparently living. People are saying, is this the same as the .com bubble that burst in the mid-2000s and we saw so much economic havoc? Honestly, talk here around Washington, D.C., not just in the political centers, but also from the tech giants and tech bros and others, is that we're probably not seeing a bubble. We're just going to see, and we are seeing ongoing, continuing, like it'll probably never end, the stunning developments with AI and everything that goes around it, and there'll be lots of investment still to come. So you'll see rises and falls in the market, but overall a crash, I'm saying no. I said that last week, and everybody was wondering, well, NVIDIA's coming out with their stock announcement and their projections coming forward for the end of the quarter. The entire stock market was sort of paralyzed and not even moving. My prediction at the time, and still today, and it was upheld yesterday, is that NVIDIA's news basically was going to be good, and that would trigger positive remarks and positive response across the market. That is exactly what happened. NVIDIA came out, their projections are positive, they're investing even more. Just on that announcement alone, the Dow Jones jumped up 692 points, NASDAQ went up over 2%, so everybody going away happy about those results as we predicted. Canada has done something, is making an interesting announcement. They're talking about it down here. For years, we have been looking at upgrading, the necessary upgrading of our Air Force, and part of that, of course, includes looking for modern jet fighters. Even when I was back a number of years ago, in the mid-2000s, I was a Minister of Public Safety at the time, the equivalent of Homeland Security for those here in the States. And of course, we were discussing very in-depth discussions on the acquisition of the F-35 military jet. And still, those procurement talks actually take years and years to do and to handle. And it looked like we were close then, but the Liberals are kind of putting things on hold. And we got Mark Carney now saying that, no, I think we might go and buy some jets from Sweden. Now, the reason behind him doing that is simply out of a matter of he's ticked off at the U.S. I've said before, and I said again, I don't like these tariffs. Tariff wars are never good. But we're doing more than just spiting, cutting off our nose, as I say, to spiting our face. We're losing track of our own ability to be logical. The F-35s are acknowledged as one of the top fighters in the world. We've had the deal pending for a long time, and now we're looking at Sweden. Listen, nothing wrong with looking at Sweden, and we love IKEA and we love those Volvos, but folks, this approach is diplomatic insanity, because we're mad at the U.S. about the tariff thing. We're compromising our continental safety. We're compromising national safety. The F-35s, in terms of capability to work with the U.S. in terms of protecting the entire continent, is clearly the way to go. And to just walk away in a huff, it just doesn't make sense, and it's going to make things intentionally, we think, even worse with the U.S. It's going to hurt our trade relations even more, make difficult our life with Americans. So we're asking Premier Carney and his people, smarten up. Let's take these one issue at a time. Don't paint everything with a broad brush and condemn Canadians not only to economic uncertainty, but also to geopolitical uncertainty. Let's give our heads a shake on this one, folks. And talk about giving our heads a shake. There's a growing consensus across Canada, not just among the scientific community and the environmental community, but among First Nations community and others, that the pipelines, we need pipelines to be built to take our highly refined oil and gas products around the world where it's so desperately needed, and the Premier of BC shaking his head saying, no, ain't gonna happen. Not gonna let pipelines take literally life-giving refined oil and gas products and liquid natural gas to places so desperately in need around the world. And he's saying, you know, trust me on this one. Well, the Premier of BC, head of the Socialist Party, the NDP party, Premier Eby, also said nothing to worry about these land claims on the city of Richmond. And as we saw, the court ruling is in favor of First Nations on those land claims, while Premier Eby was saying nothing to worry about here. So voters, you know, at election time, you need to think about things. Do we want the good of our country? Do we want economic strength? Do we want great opportunities for First Nations? Do we want to see emissions lowered worldwide? Then we have to get our liquid natural gas to market, and we have premiers like Premier Eby responding to luminaries like Greta Thunberg and saying, no, we shouldn't be doing this. So think about that at election time. Talk about all the science and economy. One thing that I'm hearing from some Americans, we're talking down here, it's all in the news about some of these grizzly attacks in Canada. And listen, first of all, I'm not diminishing those at all. And there was a recent one where several people were attacked, as you know, by a grizzly. I'm reminding people, and I see this all the time, as many Canadians do, when we're driving through our beautiful natural parks. I often see people pulled over. You might see a grizzly by the side of the road or not far from the road, and they get out of their cars and they approach these grizzlies with their iPhones, thinking Mr. or Mrs. Grizz or Ms. Grizz are just going to, you know, pose nicely and smile. Please remember that these animals can move at speeds of 50 to 60 kilometers an hour, that some of them weigh a ton, that they can rip apart steel, metal, garbage containers. They can certainly do that to a human being. So they're beautiful creatures, wonderful beasts, but don't be getting out of your car and running after them with your camera. Please, love the grizzlies, but respect them. We've got a travel advisory now has been released by Canadian authorities about Canadians going to Indonesia because for two things there. First of all, there's riots going on in Indonesia. One of the reasons there's riots, and get a hold of this, the elected people there, the parliamentarians, have given themselves huge raises in spite of the fact there's some real issues with poverty and inequality in Indonesia. So there's literally riots in the streets on that. Maybe our elected people here just should keep one ear open. More concerning on that are the Islamist terror groups. There's at least 3 large Islamist terror groups that are wreaking havoc, and as these groups usually do around the world, slaughtering, killing, destroying at very disturbing levels. Even one is too many. And once again, you see mainstream media not attaching the word Islamist to any of these terror groups that themselves claim to be Islamist. What is with media that they're afraid to use that word when it's the word that the groups themselves are using? The reason that's important, if you know the root causes of some of these things, you can deal with them collaboratively with the groups involved. So let's contrast this with a group that is meeting in Toronto today, met today and yesterday, and it's called the Imams Council. This is a group of imams who are saying that Islamist terror is wrong, that it shouldn't be happening, and they don't get the coverage that they should from mainstream media, because here you have the Imams Council condemning Islamist violence and calling it what it is. So listen, mainstream media, CBC, CNN, BBC, you can go ahead and use that word Islamist. If it was groups, excuse me, claiming to be Christian terrorists, I would be saying these groups call themselves Christian terrorists. Let's acknowledge that. You can make a way to seeing problems, severe problems handled, if people will be open and honest, talk to the groups themselves about speaking to their own people across the world that this is wrong and bringing pressure to bear. Something else is bearing down on us from outer space this time. If you haven't heard about this, check it out. It's called 31 Atlas, 31/Atlas. It's a comet of extraordinary size, And there's definitely some anomalies with this one. Scientists are looking at it with interest. And we have Harvard luminaries. We have a professor from Harvard, Avi Loeb. He's saying, you know what, I don't think it's a comet. It's actually could very well be a spaceship. That has students terrified. Well, some students are terrified, others are partying, saying this could be the end of the world. And again, you know, it's a time just to reflect a bit. First of all, the closest this comet is going to get, by the way, it's arriving here December 19th, so set your watches now. So if you don't see this broadcast on December 20th, then you'll know that the Harvard professor was right. And actually, he's being joined in support by luminaries such as Kim Kardashian. She also is very worried, and she's demanding that the truth come out, that we start telling the truth, that this is actually a spaceship coming towards us. The closest this comet is going to get, 31 Atlas, is about 170 million miles. I'm using miles, not kilometers, because I'm in the US right now, from the Earth. That's almost twice as far away as the sun is. So it's a bit of a hike to get there. It's going to pass us by that distance, hoping we're going to be able to get to see it. But remember, Harvard, coming from Harvard, and that's the settled science, folks. So keep an eye on that. We'll see who's right, Kim Kardashian and the Harvard professor, or a number of other scientists watching that carefully. But talking about scientific announcements, something here that is astounding. They're talking about it here. It's being somewhat talked about in other media, but the Center for Disease Control, which is seen as one of the anchors of scientific evidence relative to disease research for decades, they have changed something. It's their view on the link between autism and early childhood vaccine. Now, they've come up with a remarkable statement. They have to date said there is no, and they've underlined the word clearly, no linkage between childhood autism and childhood vaccinations. They've said a clear no. They have now just declared, and they just declared it yesterday, they're saying it is not likely. It is not likely that there is a link, but further research is needed. That's a dramatic shift. I'm asking, and other people are asking, can we discuss this calmly? Because we know there's the pharmaceutical side that get very upset. They don't want any discussion on this. There's many in the scientific world who are saying we don't want any discussion on this because it will deter people from getting vaccines. Listen, we just want a discussion scientifically based that looks at and seeks out the truth. And when you just shut down part of the scientific community and say you can't talk about it, that's a medieval approach. That's an ancient approach where scientists of the day would behead people or have them imprisoned if they said something that was different. So let's follow the pursuit here of science. CDC saying it's not likely, but we need more research on it. Let's be open enough to be able to say, let's talk about that. In the world, in the entertainment world, there's going to be a new publication coming out by the Murdoch Group, so it's going to be a large publication. Apparently it's going to be daily. It's going to be called the California Post, and it's going to be all reporting on Hollywood and celebrities. Most of the reporting that you see on Hollywood and so-called celebrities, it's all glitter and smiles, and anything a Hollywood celebrity says, just about anything, is taken as truth. That narrative has been kind of falling apart, and let's watch for the California Post. So when you see Leonardo DiCaprio and others, for instance, saying they've seen the end of the world with climate change, that may or may not be the case. When you see them making political announcements, they're going to be taken to task. And again, it's an approach to, we're going to be, even in the entertainment world, the ability to hear both sides of the story on something, I think, is pretty encouraging. So let's keep an eye on the California Post. And, you know, Jennifer Lawrence, great actress, as you know, she was pushed on this in an interview a few days ago. And the interview was saying, why aren't you speaking out more on climate change? Why aren't you speaking out more on political things? Jennifer Lawrence, one of the few honest political or entertainment remarks in the last little while, she said, you know what? We don't really change that many people's minds. We are actors, we are actresses, we're artists. That's what we like to do. So people, you know, we're taking ourselves too seriously, and she's not pronouncing on these things, and she's basically saying to other artists and actresses and actors, it's a free world, you can say what you like, but give your heads a shake. We're not going to change the world. We do well in our acting profession. And closing item here, the other thing that's going on, so behind me you see the Supreme Court of the United States. Not far from there is one of the larger museums in Washington, the Museum of the Bible, and they've got a display going on of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, people my age would know what those are about, but many young people wouldn't. And the Dead Sea Scrolls, these were discovered in the caves in an area called Qumran, north of the Dead Sea in Israel. They were discovered in 1947, and what they were, people found soon after they were discovered, these were copies of what we call the Bible, or fragments, about 900 different portions of the Bible. Now that would have been what we called the Old Testament. So what these were copies, and oldest copies that have ever been discovered, about 250. They were written and copied out from existing biblical texts about 250 years before the time of Christ. It's called the Common Era now, before the time of Christ. So by far the oldest copies of anything we had. The Bible that you and I, if you have one in your home, and others may read today, the versions of that were largely copied from texts that were available actually around the 1st century. So now here was something 250 years older. These were copies 250 years older. So in 1947, as scholars began to gather from around the world, and as they've continued to do so, analyze these hundreds and hundreds of fragments and portions of what the Old Testament in fact was, and of course New Testament is built up of so many quotes from the Old Testament. So a debate was raging among the academics, and they were saying, well, one thing we're going to find out, that these copies, 250 years old, many were saying, you're going to see that they're very different from the copies that we use, which were from around the 1st century, the time of Christ, and it's going to prove that in fact the texts, whether you want to believe them or not, the stuff that was written has actually been changed many times. So all scholars, whether they profess to be believers or not, they were agreeing on one thing: these were the oldest copies ever yet of what we call the Old Testament, the basis of the Jewish faith. And we're going to find out, anyway, long story short, as we know, over a period of 10 to 15 years, they were all analyzed, they continue to be analyzed, and the consensus, the clear consensus, nobody arguing, was the fact that one thing is true: these copies are almost letter to letter identical with the later modern copies that came out and were done around the turn of the millennia. And whether we like it or not, it appears they are accurate. They were accurately copied. So whether you want to believe the words of the Old Testament, which were then re-quoted in the New Testament many times, the consensus is clear: the copies are sound, they are good, and this is the first time actually in history that these copies have been are arriving at the Museum of the Bible. They're getting lots of attention, people lining up to see them. It's kind of an exciting time. Along with those copies, there are Antiquity has the Antiquity Association of Arts and Antiquity in Israel, which looks after all of the ancient items related to that amazing country, is also showing recently discovered from what has now been clearly identified as a synagogue site near Magdala. That's on what we call the Sea of Galilee, again north of Jerusalem. And it's always been argued that been argued by some that there was never a Jewish community throughout all of Israel. And in fact, anything up on the Sea of Galilee, there was probably no Jewish community because there was no synagogue in that area. And of course, the Jewish people always had a synagogue in their communities. And then it was argued by historians that Jesus probably didn't actually teach and preach in that area either, because there's no synagogue there. And very recently discovered in the last couple decades, and I've actually been to this particular site near Magdala up on the Sea of Galilee. a synagogue site, unearthed, about 2 feet below ground, meticulously preserved, and even a large stone there called the Magdala stone, where whoever the rabbis or teachers were would have sat on that stone and would have put the scrolls on their various scrolls on that stone. So some pretty interesting and exciting stuff. You can obviously have the choice to believe that there's a God or not, but the fact is, the history itself, the ground is speaking up, and some pretty amazing stuff being talked about in Washington, D.C. right now, along with all of the boring stuff, you know, like nuclear war and economic collapse. Folks, there's good news out there. Have a great day. Talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.